All right. Maybe I'll start talking, and then once the slides get going. I think the last time I presented to this group, I was a new detachment commander. It was 2017 or 18. And thank you for welcoming me back to speak to your Rotarian group. I love what the Rotary stands for. I love what you do with the community. This room is full of great people. And I will even include Scott Lavender in that comment. So, in fact, I gave a presentation to the Rotarians in Wellington back in June. So this presentation is going to be very similar to that one. It's going to be very high level police presentation like I would give to the Police Services Board. So it's going to be very, very high level. Before I get started, though, I would like to introduce a couple of my friends from the detachment. So if I can get you to stand up, Nikki Cordingley. She is an experienced police officer that came over from Kingston. She just started in the county in February, and she is going to be our new community safety officer, who is going to be replacing Aaron Miller, who I'm sure you all know. So welcome, Nikki. And I would also like to introduce Katrina Royer for the first time in the history of the Prince Edward County OPP, and it's gone through a lot of changes, Your Honor, as you can tell in the last 40, 50, 60 years. For the very first time, we have an OPP cadet. She's 19, and I think she's going to run the OPP someday. She's outstanding. So anyway, welcome, Katrina. Before I get into the meat and potatoes of these presentations, what I found over the years as detachment, I always like to ask this question. Do I have any firefighters in the audience today or online? Okay, seeing none, that's good. I usually find if there's some firefighters in the audience, I have to speak a little slower so that they understand, but I've got a really good group here. So so I always tease firefighters. My good friend, David Fox, used to be the chair of the Police Services Board, who you know very well. Dave's a very busy guy in the county, and he's a volunteer firefighter. And so I would usually poke fun of him. So that's good. So for today's presentation, and I only have 30 minutes, so I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to keep you to your busy schedules. I'm going to go back one. Yeah, so if I can get this to work. This was working before, trust me. Maybe if it's on this screen, I can't use this thing. Can you go back one? Okay, so to advance it is...
Well, just try it again.
No, that's not working. My laser works. So that's a good thing. There we go. Just click on that. Okay, I think we've got through the glitches. For today's presentation, I'm going to talk about the detachment action plan. Very high level stuff. Every detachment in the province has an action plan. I'm going to talk about the Police Service Board report. So when I first became detachment commander, I used to report monthly to the Police Services Board. And what they do is they hold me accountable as a detachment commander. I'm going to show you some statistics from 2022 compared to 2023. And I'm going to demonstrate how well we are doing in Prince Edward County and how safe Prince Edward County really is. And then lastly, the last part of the presentation, I'm going to answer the questions that Raj collected, and I think I have 6. So if everything goes well, I'll have you out here in half an hour. So the detachment action plan, every detachment in the province, and there's 70 detachments. When you think of how big the province is, every detachment in the province has an action plan. Every detachment commander writes it, and we focus on 3 areas. One is crime reduction. So what are we going to do as detachment commander within our detachments to reduce crime? And crime is broken down into 3 categories: violent crime, property crime, and drug crime. And I'll touch on those later on in the presentation. Next, we talk about highway safety. What am I as a detachment commander going to do to keep our highways safe? And what strategies are we going to use? And there was one question about ride programs later, which was great, which I will touch on later as well. And then lastly, every action plan has other priorities. Now, the priorities in Prince Edward County are different from the priorities in Hawkesbury, and they're different from the priorities in Kenora. But we have determined from our calls for service, from our statistics, that in Prince Edward County, the things we need to focus on are Mental Health Act incidents, which I'll touch on later, domestic violence and intimate partner violence, impaired driving, and fraud. So if you want to look at the action plan, it's online, but it's kind of a roadmap or a recipe that I produce that my officers can follow to get the job done. So like I said earlier, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, when I used to report monthly. So the Police Services Board represents the community. They hold the detachment commander. In a bigger city like Kingston or Belleville, they hold the chief of police accountable. And so what I do, and now it's quarterly, so it's a little bit less work for me, is I would meet with them and I would go over our calls for service for that month or for that quarter or for the year. And it's a report back. And so what today's presentation is going to be, I'm going to be reporting back to you today on how well we are really doing here in Prince Edward County. I always start off with public complaints. People want to know who's complaining about who and what are the complaints. I was very proud at our last meeting in July. Katrina was there. How many complaints have we had in Prince Edward County so far this year? That is incredible. When you think of the number of interactions that we have on a daily basis, traffic stops, domestic violence complaints, break and enters, and we haven't had one public complaint against our officers. Outstanding. Next, I talk about staffing levels. So I'm like a general manager of a hockey team. The way I look at it, I want to win the Stanley Cup. I want to stack my team full of winners. I'm running at about 82%. That's actually pretty good. During COVID, I was in the 60s. Officers were off, injured. We weren't getting the numbers. I'm very happy right now. We're getting an experienced officer from Ottawa starting next week. He's supposed to be a rock star. And we have 2 cadets that started yesterday at the police college. So we're getting 3 more in the next couple of months, which is outstanding. Mm-hmm. And then I go into the meat and potatoes, the violent crime, the property crime, and the highway safety. So at a typical Police Services Board meeting, I would go through all of these violent crime indicators. Now, this is where I'd like to walk around and use my finger, but I will just use the pointer. If you take a look at the first 3 columns, murder, other offenses causing death, and attempted murder. And you take a look at the statistics over the last 9 years, and except for one little block, they're all zeros. That tells me Prince Edward County is a very safe place to live. And I will touch on why we had that one, but it was a drug-related incident that happened a couple of years ago. And then I look at the sexual assault column, or the row. In 2014, we had 22. 2015, we had 20. 2016, we had 20. 2017, we had 20. And then there was a huge jump to 29. And then 29, then 32, then 37. And last year we had 36. Why do you think we had that jump in numbers? No, it was pre-COVID. Nikki, I did this presentation earlier and Nikki got it right. So what ended up happening was the Me Too movement, and the message started to get out. If you're a victim of violence, please come forward. Because if you don't, that accused, that perpetrator is just going to keep doing it. I can tell you of the 36 sexual assault investigations that our officers investigated last year, 13, so just over a third, were historical. They happened more than a year ago. And so that victim sat on that information. There was one actually that was reported from the sandbanks from 1975. That victim has been sitting on that information for all those years and has finally gotten enough courage to come forward and tell us. And I think that's great. We want to increase the help to these victims. Look at assaults. What's the next category? Violent crime. The numbers are, pretty much the same. 113 is the average over the last 9 years. We had 114 last year. So what's an assault investigation? Well, it could be 2 17-year-olds fighting at the high school. It could be a domestic violence assault. It could be 2 guys in a bar outside on Picton Main Street at 2 o'clock in the morning. But the police get called and we will investigate an assault. So those numbers, we get about 2 a week. And that's just in every society, you're going to get that. That's what we do. Then you take a look at the abduction column. Very glad that we've had 0 in 2021. Did everybody get that emergency alert this morning? So that is typically, if we're going to get an abduction, it's going to be that type. The father has come in and taken the child, or the mother has come and taken the child. The other parent has called the police. It's an abduction. We will investigate. In every single one of these cases, though, we've been able to locate the child and they've been safe, which is good. And then I look at robbery, We've averaged one a year over the course of the last 9 years. But look at those zeros for the last 5 years. That's a real comforting statistic. We haven't, a robbery is like a theft with violence, with a knife. Somebody steals a woman's purse with a knife. We haven't had that. People in Prince Edward County can feel relatively safe walking down Bloomfield Main Street, Wellington Main Street, Picton Main Street, 1 o'clock in the morning. We don't have that violence here. And this is the incident that I was referring to, why we had that one murder, manslaughter charge with Thomas Fox. That is the only incident that we've had in Prince Edward County. Think of the headlines in Toronto, Montreal, and even Belleville and Kingston. We don't have that problem here. So after violent crime, I'm reporting to the Police Services Board property crime. If you take a look at arson, so arson, somebody's deliberately set fire to a house, a boat, a car. We've only averaged 2.5 over the last 9 years. Last year, none. That's great. The next row, break and enter, is probably my most proud, and I can't even call it accomplishment because I didn't do anything about it. But if you take a look at the numbers in 2014, 84 break and enters. The next year, 94, 2016, 91, 95. In 2018, I was a brand new detachment commander. The OPP across the province implemented the community street crime unit. So these guys, they wear ball caps, Metallica t-shirts, jeans. They don't look like cops, but they are out there turning over stones. They have informants, and they started cleaning up our streets. Take a look at the numbers. 2019, we had 50, then we're down to 33, 37, 34. Last year in Prince Edward County, we only investigated 17 break and enters. That is incredible. So that means that the officers aren't out doing that investigation. That means we're not getting all of those victims. And some of the things that help us with that, and I promote this all the time, cameras. So if you have cameras in and around your house, go to www.camsafe.ca. Let us know where these cameras are. They help us solve these crimes. Then we look at the theft. A theft over 5,000 is one of those categories. Typically, it's a theft of a vehicle. Every vehicle is over $5,000 now. You get a theft of a vehicle, it's a theft over 5,000. But you'll see some increases in the last couple of years, 22, 25, 32. So the Police Services Board said, well, why do we have such a huge theft of vehicles? Well, it's not. Theft of mail, M-A-I-L, is a federal crime. So it is considered theft over 5,000. Have you heard of porch pirates? You order something from Amazon, it comes, the guy leaves the box on the front step, and then some miscreants driving by and they steal that box. That's a theft of mail. It counts as a theft over. So I can explain why there's an increase in those numbers. The theft under 5,000 is shoplifting. It's a bunch of kids going through a neighborhood at night, stealing stuff out of the cars, cell phones, purses, which is why I always remind people, lock your doors, even at home. I know this is Prince Edward County and people think that it's not going to happen, but make it tougher for those thieves. Gasoline drive-offs. You would be surprised how many people come over the bridge. I feel sorry for the owners of the Rossmore Petro. They take their gas and they just drive off. But once again, this is where the cameras help us out. Have stolen goods is just basically possession of stolen property. Fraud. This is near and dear to my heart. And our seniors, Laura McGugan. So one of the great things about Katrina is I've asked her to dig down into each one of our fraud calls for the first half of the year. You see that we had an average of about 100 fraud calls over the last 9 years. Last year, 177. Why is that? I want people to call us when they've been defrauded. There is a statistic out there that only 10% of victims will call the police. They won't even tell their family because they're embarrassed. I had Katrina go through some of the statistics for this year. So from January 1st to July 1st, we've had 78 reports of fraud. The average amount of loss, $10,000. There were victims in 72% of those 78 incidents. The highest, and this is where it really gets me, the highest amount of money that some individual lost, probably some senior, $306,000. The grand total of all of those frauds in the first 6 months of the year, $815,000. We have a problem with fraud in Prince Edward County, which is why, and I'm going to touch on it later with our community safety and well-being plan, we want to educate. And Nikki, hold up that pamphlet that Laura just gave us today. We need to educate. Knowledge is power. And when Aaron Miller was our community safety officer, he would send out media releases on Friday Fraud Talk. These are the scams that are going on right now. Grandparent scam, Bitcoin scam. So this is definitely an issue that we are focusing on in Prince Edward County. And then lastly, property crime, which I would report to the Police Services Board. Our average was 94 over the last time. We only had 55. Well, what's mischief? Mischief is somebody spray paints the side of the wall. That's graffiti. Mischief is somebody keys the side of a car. That's mischief. Somebody takes a hockey stick or a mailbox to a mailbox. We only had 55 incidents last year. That's pretty good. That means my officers can go out and do more proactive things like ride programs, traffic stops, and foot patrols. And then the last category that I report to the Police Service Board is highway safety. And I look at every single big collision. So our average fatality rate over the last 9 years was 2. Very, very pleased to say that last year in 2023, we had 0 fatalities. And so far this year, we've had 0 fatalities. We've gone 20 months without a fatality. And think of the number of vehicles that come in and out of Prince Edward County on a daily basis. So that is incredible. I'm very proud of that statistic. The personal injury or PI, so we've averaged 48 PI collisions. So a PI collision is when 2 vehicles or a single vehicle and the driver gets hurt. The ambulance comes, they could have whiplash, they get a broken arm. That is a PI. So we average 1 a week. Last year, only 36. So think of the number of victims that we didn't have, the number of trips that the ambulance didn't have to make. That's a great thing. And the last category is property damage. So PD collision. And it can be anything from a fender bender to a car deer. Actually, some of those 380 are our officers, right, Nikki? It was, so one of the things, and I did the statistics, 1/3 of our collisions are car deer accidents. The deer do not have any real predators around here, and it's unfortunate, but this is why we do some targeted media in October, November, keep veer for deer. I got Aaron Miller would always come up with something clever for the sign out front of the detachment. Anyway, so that completes kind of my high-level report that I would give to the Police Services Board. And like I said to these officers, it's really good for me when I can present good information. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, but I'm going to touch on it very briefly. Back in 2016, the Ontario government mandated that every community in Ontario needed to have a Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Debbie was at that very first meeting. I remember very well. It was at your office. And there are 323 communities in the province of Ontario. Prince Edward County was the 6th one to get ours submitted. We are already on our 2nd plan. What we've identified as a community, and there's about 25 to 30 different agencies, community care for seniors, public health, the OPP. We've identified 5 areas, I call them pillars, within our community that we need to focus on. And they are very housing and home. Do we have a housing problem in Prince Edward County? Absolutely. Senior support, sitting right up here in the front. Poverty reduction, which goes with housing and homelessness. Mental health and problematic substance abuse. And then domestic violence and intimate partner violence. So if you want to go online and take a look, the OPP, I sit on every one of these action teams. Yesterday, as a matter of fact, we had an action team meeting with senior support in the afternoon. And in the morning, I was with Alternatives for Women talking about what are we going to do to make Prince Edward County safe in relation to each one of these categories. So I really encourage you to go. I just want you to know there are a lot of great people doing a lot of great work behind the scenes to make our community safe. So when I put up this slide, and if you can see it at home, there's a lot of green on there. We're going in the right direction in terms of domestic violence, mental health, assault, theft, sexual assault. We only went down by 1. The big one is break and enter. cut it in half. We're going in the right direction. Where there's red, fraud investigations, that's okay. I want people to call us when they've been defrauded us. I want them to tell us, I just got had by this scam, so I can tell everybody in Prince Edward County, watch out for this because it's coming. And impaired driving investigations, we have a problem with impaired driving in Prince Edward County. The numbers are through the roof. We used to average about 40 a year when I became detachment commander, and they just keep going up. We had 69 in 2022. We had 86 in 2023. And the Police Services Board asked me, why do you think that is? And I said, well, I think personally, because I've got an office full of crackerjack officers that are out there at 1, 2, and 3 o'clock in the morning stopping cars. I had Katrina, once again, thank you, Katrina. She ran some statistics for impaireds. So far this year, first 6 months, 33 impaired drivers. We're on pace for 66, which is what we had 2 years ago, roughly. We caught 37% of those impaired drivers at ride programs. And so one of you asked a question about ride programs, which I'm going to touch on, but I think the reason why that number went to 86 is because of the officers at the detachment. I'm actually very proud to report that a couple months ago, MAD Canada came to our office and presented a platoon with an award. They caught an enormous amount because they're out there stopping cars, keeping our highways safe. And this is my last, if I can get there. So things are good right now. I was telling somebody, I have a countdown calendar on my phone. I only have 240 days before I can retire. But I'm not counting the days. I want to make the days count. I want to leave on a high note. I want the detachment to be in good shape. And we are going to be. A couple of years ago, the OPP in their wisdom hired some retired officers, and they went around the entire province, and they did what's called a service delivery model. They could see. For the last 20 years, we've only had 40 officers at Prince Edward County Detachment. 1 staff sergeant, 4 sergeants, and 35 constables. That's all we've had. But they are implementing the service delivery model. In the next 5 years, we're going to increase our staffing by 25%. We are going to get an additional sergeant. We already got him. We just did the competition. We're getting in a cadet. She's right here. And it's been a great addition to the detachment. We're going to get 4 additional frontline constables. Our platoons right now run with 5 constables and a sergeant. We're now going to have 6 constables and a sergeant in the next 5 years. And then the biggest help is going to be in our court system. Nick, if you can stand up, we have all the officers now have body-worn cameras. Every traffic stop, every domestic, every incident we go to, everything is recorded. You can think of the volume of recorded information. You can sit down now, thank you. That our court officers have to go through. We are going to have the staffing to do that now, and that's great. So when I leave next year, my goal is that the detachment is going to be fully staffed. We're going to be headed in the right direction. We're going to be working on our community safety well-being plan, and we're going to do and I like to say, it's not a competition. I just like Prince Edward County to be first, and I think we're there. So that finishes the high level portion. Okay. There's always something technical. There we go. Any questions on this so far?